Al-Andalus, also known as Muslim Spain or Islamic Iberia, was a medieval Islamic state occupying at its peak most of what are today Spain and Portugal. The name more generally describes parts of the Iberian Peninsula governed by Muslims at various times between 711 and 1492, though the boundaries changed constantly as the reconquista progressed. Following the Muslim conquest of Hispania, Al-Andalus was divided into 5 administrative units, corresponding roughly to modern Andalusia, Galicia and Portugal, Castile and León, Aragon, County of Barcelona and Septimania. As a political domain, it successively constituted a province of the Umayyad Caliphate, initiated by the Caliph Al-Walid I. The Emirate of Córdoba, the Caliphate of Córdoba, and the Caliphate of Córdoba's Taifa kingdoms. Rule under these kingdoms saw a rise in cultural exchange and cooperation between Muslims and Christians, with Christians and Jews considered as protected people who paid a tax to the state but enjoyed internal autonomy. It is noted that under the Caliphate of Córdoba, Al-Andalus was a beacon of learning, and the city of Córdoba became one of the leading cultural and economic centers in Europe and throughout the Mediterranean Basin in the Islamic world. A number of achievements that advanced Islamic and Western science came from Al-Andalus, including major advances in trigonometry, astronomy, surgery, pharmacology, and other fields. Indeed, Al-Andalus became a major educational center for Europe and the Mediterranean region, as well as a conduit for culture and science between the Islamic world and the Christian world. For much of its history, Al-Andalus existed in conflict with Christian kingdoms to the north. After the fall of the Umayyad Caliphate, Al-Andalus was fragmented into a number of minor states and principalities, most notably the Emirate of Granada. Attacks from the Christian Castilians intensified, led by Alfonso VI. The Almoravid Empire intervened and repelled the Christian attacks on the region, deposing the weak Andalusian Muslim princes and including Al-Andalus under direct Berber rule. In succeeding centuries, Al-Andalus became a province of the Berber Muslim empires of the Almoravids and Almohads, both based in Marrakesh. Ultimately, the Christian kingdoms of the north overpowered their Muslim neighbors. In 1085, Alfonso VI captured Toledo, starting a gradual Muslim decline. With the fall of Córdoba in 1236, the Emirate of Granada was the only Muslim territory in what is now Spain. The Portuguese reconquista culminated in 1249 with the conquest of the Algarve by Afonso III. In 1238, the Emirate of Granada officially became a tributary state to the Kingdom of Castile, then ruled by King Ferdinand III. Finally, on January 2, 1492, Emir Muhammad XII surrendered the Emirate of Granada to Queen Isabella I of Castile, who along with her husband King Ferdinand II of Aragon were known as the Catholic monarchs. The surrender ended Al-Andalus as a political entity, though aspects of Islamic culture are still evident in the region. Etymology. The etymology of Al-Andalus is disputed, as is the extent of Iberian territory encompassed by the name over the centuries. The name is first attested to by inscriptions on coins minted by the new Muslim government in Iberia, circa 715. At least 3 specific etymologies have been proposed in Western scholarship, all presuming that the name arose after the Roman period in the Iberian Peninsula's history. Their originators or defenders have been historians. Recently, linguistics expertise has been brought to bear on the issue. Arguments from toponymy, history, and language structure demonstrate the lack of substance in all following proposals, and evidence has been presented that the name predates, rather than postdates, the Roman occupation. Vandal theory. The name Andalusia or Vandalusia is traditionally believed to be derived from Vandal. The proposal is sometimes associated with the 19th-century historian Reinhard Dozy, but it predates him and he recognized some of its shortcomings. Although he accepted that Al-Andalus derived from Vandal, he believed that geographically it referred only to the harbour from which the Vandals departed Iberia for Africa. The location of which harbour was unknown. Visigoth theory. In the 1980s, the historian Heinz Harm, also rejecting the Vandal proposal, originated an innovative alternative. Harm took as his points of departure ancient reports that Germanic tribes in general were reported to have distributed conquered lands by having members draw lots, and that Iberia during the period of Visigothic rule was sometimes known to outsiders by a Latin name, Gothicus, whose meaning is Gothic lot. Harm thereupon speculated that the Visigoths themselves might have called their new lands lot lands, and done so in their own language. However, the Gothic language version of the term Gothicus is not attested. Harm claimed to have been able to reconstruct it, proposing that it was al-ʼAndalus. Harm then suggested that the hypothetical Gothic language term gave rise to both the attested Latin term, Gothicus, and the Arabic name, al-Andalus. However, Harm did not offer evidence that any of the language developments in his argument had in fact occurred. Atlantis Theory. Another proposal is that Andalus is an Arabic language version of the name Atlantis. This idea has recently been defended by the Spanish historian Valva Copyright, but purely on the grounds that it is allegedly plausible phonetically and would explain several toponymic facts. Valva Copyright writes, Arabic texts offering the first mentions of the island of Al-Andalus and the Sea of Al-Andalus become extraordinarily clear if we substitute these expressions with Atlantis, or Atlantic. The same can be said with reference to Hercules and the Amazons, whose island, according to Arabic commentaries of these Greek and Latin legends, was located in Jawf al-Andalus, that is, to the north or interior of the Atlantic Ocean. The island of Al-Andalus is mentioned in an anonymous Arabic chronicle of the conquest of Iberia composed 2 to 3 centuries after the fact. It is identified as the location of the landfall of the advance guard of the Moorish conquest of Iberia. The chronicle also says that island of Al-Andalus was subsequently renamed Island of Tarifa. The preliminary conquest force of a few hundred, led by the Berber chief, Tarif Abu Zura, seized the first bit of land that is encountered after crossing the Strait of Gibraltar in 710. The main conquest force led by Tariq ibn Ziyad followed them a year later. The landfall, now known in Spain as either Punta Marroca or Punta de Tarifa, is in fact the southern tip of an islet, presently known as Isla de Tarifa or Isla de las Palomas, just offshore of the Iberian mainland. This testimony of the Arab chronicle, the modern name Isla de Tarifa, and the above-mentioned toponymic evidence that Andalus is a name of pre-Roman origin taken together lead to the supposition that the island of Andalus is the present-day Isla de Tarifa, which lies just offshore from the modern-day Spanish city of Tarifa. The extension of the scope of the designation Al-Andalus from a single islet to all of Iberia has several historical precedents. History, province of the Caliphate. During the Caliphate of the Umayyad Caliph Al-Walid I, the Berber commander Tariq ibn Ziyad led a small force that landed at Gibraltar on April 30, 711, ostensibly to intervene in a Visigothic civil war. After a decisive victory over King Roderick at the Battle of Gadlit on July 19, 711, Tariq ibn Ziyad, joined by Arab governor Musa ibn Nasser of Ifriqiya, brought most of the Visigothic kingdom under Muslim occupation in a 7-year campaign. They crossed the Pyrenees and occupied Visigothic Septimania in southern France. Most of the Iberian Peninsula became part of the expanding Umayyad Empire, under the name of Al-Andalus. It was organized as a province subordinate to Ifriqiya, so, for the first few decades, the governors of Al-Andalus were appointed by the Emir of Kairouan, rather than the Caliph in Damascus. The regional capital was set at Kharkub-Doba, and the initial influx of Muslim colonists were widely distributed. Euro-Arab colonists were assigned to the south and east, while Berber colonists were scattered across the west and center. Visigothic lords who agreed to recognize Muslim suzerainty were allowed to retain their fiefs. Resistant Visigoths took refuge in the Cantabrian highlands, where they carved out a rump state, the Kingdom of Asturias. In the 720s, the Andalusian governors launched several cipher raids into Aquitaine, but were severely defeated by Duke Odo the Great of Aquitaine at the Battle of Toulouse. However, after crashing Odo's Berber ally Uthman ibn Nessa on the eastern Pyrenees, Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi led an expedition north across the western Pyrenees and defeated the Aquitanian duke, who in turn appealed to the Frankish leader Charles Martel for assistance, offering to place himself under Carolingian sovereignty. At the Battle of Poitiers in 732, the Andalusian raiding army was defeated by Charles Martel. In 734, the Andalusians launched raids to the east, capturing Avignon and Arles and overran much of Provence. In 737, they climbed up the Rhône valley, reached as far as Burgundy. Charles Martel of the Franks, with the assistance of Luthprand of the Lombards, invaded Burgundy and Provence and expelled the raiders by 739. Relations between Arabs and Berbers in Al-Andalus had been tense in the years after the conquest. Berbers heavily outnumbered the Arabs in the province, and had done the bulk of the fighting, but they had been given the lesser plums of the conquest and were assigned the harsher duties. Although some Arab governors had cultivated their Berber lieutenants, others had grievously mistreated them. Mutinies by Berber soldiers were frequent. For example, in 729, the Berber commander Munis revolted and managed to carve out a rebel state in Sardinia for a spell. In 740, a great Berber revolt erupted in the Maghreb. To put down the rebellion, the Umayyad Caliph Hisham dispatched a large Arab army, composed of regiments of Bilad ash-Sham to North Africa. But the great Syrian army was crushed by the Berber rebels at the Battle of Bagdura. Heartened by the victories of their North African brethren, the Berbers of Al-Andalus quickly raised their own revolt. Berber garrisons in northern Spain mutinied, deposed their Arab commanders, and organized a large rebel army to march against the strongholds of Toledo, Córdoba, and Algeciras. The Andalusian Arab governor, joined by the remnant of the Syrian army which had fled across the straits, crushed the Berber rebels in a series of ferocious battles in 742. However, a quarrel immediately erupted between the Syrian commanders and the older Andalusian Arabs. The Syrians defeated the Andalusians at the hard-fought Battle of Aquaportera in August 742 but were too few to impose themselves on the province. The quarrel was settled in 743 with the distribution of the Syrians in regimental fiefs across Al-Andalus. The Damascus Jund was established in Elvira, the Jordan Jund in Rayu, the Jund Philastin Jund in Medina Sidonia and Gires, the Emesa Jund in Seville and Naibla, and the Kinazaran Jund in Jor. Copyright N. The Egypt Jund was divided between Bejar in the west and Tadmir in the east. The arrival of the Syrians increased substantially the Arab element in the Iberian Peninsula and helped deepen the Muslim hold on the south. However, at the same time, unwilling to be governed, the Syrian Junds carried on an existence of autonomous feudal anarchy, severely destabilizing the authority of the governor of Al-Andalus. A second significant consequence of the revolt was the expansion of the Kingdom of the Asturias, hitherto confined to enclaves in the Cantabrian highlands. After the rebellious Berber garrisons evacuated the northern frontier fortresses, the Christian king Alfonso I of Asturias set about immediately seizing the empty forts for himself, quickly adding the northwestern provinces of Galicia and León to his fledgling kingdom. The Asturians evacuated the Christian populations from the towns and villages of the Galician Leonese lowlands, creating an empty buffer zone in the Douro River Valley. This newly emptied frontier would remain roughly in place for the next few centuries as the boundary between the Christian north and the Islamic south. Between this frontier and the Andalusian heartland in the south, the Andalusian state organized three large March territories, the Lower March, the Middle March, and the Upper March. These disturbances and disorders also allowed the Franks, now under the leadership of Pin the Short, to invade the strategic strip of Septimania in 752, hoping to deprive Andalusians of their easy launching pad for raids into Francia. After a lengthy siege, the last Arab stronghold, the citadel of Narbonne, finally fell to the Franks in 759. Al-Andalus was sealed off at the Pyrenees. The third consequence of the Berber revolt was the collapse of the authority of the Damascus Caliphate over the western provinces. With the Umayyad Caliphs distracted by the challenge of the Abbasids in the east, the western provinces of the Maghreb and Al-Andalus spun out of their control. From around 745, the Furids, an illustrious local Arab clan descended from Uqba ibn Nafi al-Fihri, seized power in the western provinces and ruled them almost as a private family empire of their own. Abd al-Rahman ibn Habib al-Fihri in Ifriqiya and Yusuf al-Fihri in Al-Andalus. The Furids welcomed the fall of the Umayyads in the east, in 750, and sought to reach an understanding with the Abbasids, hoping they might be allowed to continue their autonomous existence. But when the Abbasids rejected the offer and demanded submission, the Furids declared independence and, probably out of spite, invited the deposed remnants of the Umayyad clan to take refuge in their dominions. It was a fateful decision that they soon regretted, for the Umayyads, the sons and grandsons of caliphs, had a more legitimate claim to rule than the Furids themselves. Rebellious-minded local lords, disenchanted with the autocratic rule of the Furids, intrigued with the arriving Umayyad exiles. Umayyad Emirate and Caliphate of Córdoba. In 756, the exiled Umayyad prince Abd al-Rahman I ousted Yusuf al-Fihri to establish himself as the emir of Córdoba. He refused to submit to the Abbasid caliph, as Abbasid forces had killed most of his family. Over a 30-year reign, he established a tenuous rule over much of Al-Andalus, overcoming partisans of both the al-Fihri family and of the Abbasid caliph. For the next century and a half, his descendants continued as emirs of Córdoba with nominal control over the rest of Al-Andalus and sometimes parts of western North Africa, but with real control, particularly over the marches along the Christian border, vacillating depending on the competence of the individual emir. Indeed, the power of Emir Abdullah ibn Muhammad did not extend beyond Córdoba itself. But his grandson Abd al-Rahman III, who succeeded him in 912, not only rapidly restored Umayyad power throughout Al-Andalus but extended it into western North Africa as well. In 929 he proclaimed himself caliph, elevating the emirate to a position competing in prestige not only with the Abbasid caliph in Baghdad but also the Shiite caliph in Tunisia with whom he was competing for control of North Africa. The period of the caliphate is seen as the golden age of Al-Andalus. Crops produced using irrigation, along with food imported from the Middle East, provided the area around Córdoba and some other Andalusia cities with an agricultural economic sector that was the most advanced in Europe by far. Among European cities, Córdoba under the Caliphate, with a population of perhaps 500,000, eventually overtook Constantinople as the largest and most prosperous city in Europe. Within the Islamic world, Córdoba was one of the leading cultural centers. The work of its most important philosophers and scientists had a major influence on the intellectual life of medieval Europe. Muslims and non-Muslims often came from abroad to study in the famous libraries and universities of Al-Andalus after the reconquest of Toledo in 1085. The most noted of these was Michael Scott, who took the works of Ibn Ushd and Ibn Sina to Italy. This transmission was to have a significant impact on the formation of the European Renaissance. First Hafez period. The Córdoba Caliphate effectively collapsed during a ruinous civil war between 1009 and 1013, although it was not finally abolished until 1031 when Al-Andalus broke up into a number of mostly independent mini-states and principalities called Taifas. These were generally too weak to defend themselves against repeated raids and demands for tribute from the Christian states to the north and west, which were known to the Muslims as the Galician nations, and which had spread from their initial strongholds in Galicia, Asturias, Cantabria, the Basque Country, and the Carolingian Marca Hispanica to become the kingdoms of Navarre, Leeuwarden, Portugal, Castile and Aragon, and the county of Barcelona. Eventually raids turned into conquests, and in response the Taifa kings were forced to request help from the Almoravids, Muslim Berber rulers of the Maghreb. Their desperate maneuver would eventually fall to their disadvantage, however, as the Almoravids they had summoned from the south went on to conquer and annex all the Taifa kingdoms. Almoravids, Almohads and Marinids. In 1086 the Almoravid ruler of Morocco, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, was invited by the Muslim princes in Iberia to defend them against Alfonso VI, King of Castile and Leeuwarden. In that year, Tashfin crossed the straits to Algeciras and inflicted a severe defeat on the Christians at the Battle of Sagrajas. By 1094, Yusuf ibn Tashfin had removed all Muslim princes in Iberia and had annexed their states, except for the one at Zaragoza. He also regained Valencia from the Christians. The Almoravids were succeeded by the Almohads, another Berber dynasty, after the victory of Abu Yusuf al-Mansur over the Castilian Alfonso VIII at the Battle of Ilocos in 1195. In 1212 a coalition of Christian kings under the leadership of the Castilian Alfonso VIII defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. The Umayyads continued to rule Al-Andalus for another decade, though with much reduced power and prestige. The civil wars following the death of Abu Yusuf II rapidly led to the re-establishment of Taifas. The Taifas, newly independent but now weakened, were quickly conquered by Portugal, Castile, and Aragon. After the fall of Murcia and the Algarve, only the Emirate of Granada survived as a Muslim state, and only as a tributary of Castile. Most of its tribute was paid in gold that was carried to Iberia from present-day Mali and Burkina Faso through the merchant routes of the Sahara. The last Muslim threat to the Christian kingdoms was the rise of the Marinids in Morocco during the 14th century. They took Granada into their sphere of influence and occupied some of his cities, like Algeciras. However, they were unable to take Tarifa, which held out until the arrival of the Castilian army led by Alfonso XI. The Castilian king, with the help of Afonso IV of Portugal and Peter IV of Aragon, decisively defeated the Marinids at the Battle of Rayo Salado in 1340 and took Algeciras in 1344. Gibraltar, then under Grenadian rule, was besieged in 1349 €50. Alfonso XI and most of his army perished by the Black Death. His successor, Peter of Castile, made peace with the Muslims and turned his attention to Christian lands, starting a period of almost 150 years of rebellions and wars between the Christian states that secured the survival of Granada. In 1469 the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile signalled the launch of the final assault on the Emirate of Granada. The king and queen convinced the pope to declare their war a crusade. The Christians crushed one centre of resistance after another and finally, in January 1492, after a long siege, the Moorish Sultan Muhammad XII surrendered the fortress palace, the renowned Alhambra Society. The Society of Al-Andalus was made up of three main religious groups, Christians, Muslims, and Jews. The Muslims, though united on the religious level, had several ethnic divisions, the main being the distinction between the Berbers and the Arabs. Most Arabs were Christians who had long lived under Muslim rule, adopting many Arabic customs, art, and words, while still maintaining their Christian rituals and their own Romance languages. Each of these communities inhabited distinct neighborhoods in the cities. In the 10th century a massive conversion of Christians took place, and Mulades formed the majority of Muslims. The Mulades had spoken in a Romance dialect of Latin called Mozarabic while increasingly adopting the Arabic language, which eventually evolved into the Andalusian dialect in which Muslims, Jews, and Christians became monolingual and by the time of the Emirate of Granada. Eventually, the Mulades, and later the Berber tribes, adopted an Arabic identity like the majority of subject people in Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, and North Africa. Mulades, together with other Muslims, comprised 80% of the population of Al-Andalus by around 1100. The Berbers, who made up the bulk of the invaders, lived in the mountainous regions of what is now the north of Portugal and in the Meseta Central, while the Arabs settled in the south and in the Bro Valley in the northeast. The Jews worked mainly as tax collectors, in trade, or as doctors or ambassadors. At the end of the 15th century there were about 50,000 Jews in Granada and roughly 100,000 in the whole of Islamic Iberia. Non-Muslims under the Caliphate. The non-Muslims were given the status of al-Dhimma, with adults paying a jizya tax, equal to 1 dinar per year with exemptions for old people, women, children, and the disabled. Those who were neither Christians nor Jews, such as pagans, were given the status of magus. The treatment of non-Muslims in the Caliphate has been a subject of considerable debate among scholars and commentators, especially those interested in drawing parallels to the coexistence of Muslims and non-Muslims in the modern world. Jews constituted more than 5% of the population. Al-Andalus was a key center of Jewish life during the early Middle Ages, producing important scholars and one of the most stable and wealthy Jewish communities. Bernard Lewis takes issue with this view, arguing its modern uses are historical and apologetic. He argues that Islam traditionally did not offer equality nor even pretended to, and that it would have been both a theological as well as a logical absurdity. However, even Bernard Lewis states, generally, the Jewish people were allowed to practice their religion and live according to the laws and scriptures of their community. Furthermore, the restrictions to which they were subject were social and symbolic rather than tangible and practical in character. That is to say, these regulations served to define the relationship between the two communities, and not to oppress the Jewish population. The Caliphate treated non-Muslims differently at different times. The longest period of tolerance began after 912 with the reign of Abd-ar-Rahman III and his son, Al-Hakam II, when the Jews of Al-Andalus prospered, devoting themselves to the service of the Caliphate of Córdoba, to the study of the sciences, and to commerce and industry, especially trading in silk and slaves, in this way promoting the prosperity of the country. Southern Iberia became an asylum for the oppressed Jews of other countries. Under the Almoravids and the Almohads there may have been intermittent persecution of Jews, but sources are extremely scarce and do not give a clear picture, though the situation appears to have deteriorated after 1160. Muslim pogroms against Jews in Al-Andalus occurred in Córdoba and in Granada. However, massacres of dhimmis are rare in Islamic history. The Jews of Granada did not have dhimmi status. The Almohads, who had taken control of the Almoravids' Marabi and Andalusian territories by 1147, far surpassed the Almoravids in fundamentalist outlook, and they treated the non-Muslims harshly. Faced with a choice of either death or conversion, many Jews and Christians emigrated. Some, such as the family of Maimonides, fled east to more tolerant Muslim lands, while others went northward to settle in the growing Christian kingdoms. Rise and fall of Muslim power. The last Muslim bastion, Granada, fell in 1492. By this time Muslims in Castile had numbered 500,000. After the fall, 100,000 had died or been enslaved, 200,000 emigrated, and 200,000 remained as the residual population. Many of the Muslim elite, including Muhammad XII, who had been given the area of the Alpujarras Mountains as a principality, found life under Christian rule intolerable and passed over into North Africa. Under the conditions of capitulation, the Muslims in the Granada were to be allowed to continue to practice their religion. This freedom was forcibly removed about 1500, although in the kingdoms of Aragon and Valencia the freedom of religion continued for another 20 years. The descendants of the Muslims were expelled from Spain in 1609. Culture. Many tribes, religions, and races coexisted in Al-Andalus, each contributing to its intellectual prosperity. Literacy in Islamic Iberia was far more widespread than in many other nations in the West at the time. From the earliest days, the Umayyads wanted to be seen as intellectual rivals to the Abbasids, and for Córdoba to have libraries and educational institutions to rival Baghdad's. Although there was a clear rivalry between the two powers, freedom to travel between the two caliphates was allowed, which helped spread new ideas and innovations over time. Philosophy, Andalusian philosophy. The historian said Al-Andalus wrote that Caliph Abd-ar-Rahman III had collected libraries of books and granted patronage to scholars of medicine and ancient sciences. Later, Al-Mustansir went yet further, building a university and libraries in Córdoba. Córdoba became one of the world's leading centers of medicine and philosophical debate. However, when Al-Hakam's son Hisham II took over, real power was ceded to the Hajib, Al-Mansur ibn Amir. Al-Mansur was a distinctly religious man and disapproved of the sciences of astronomy, logic, and especially astrology, so much so that many books on these subjects, which had been preserved and collected at great expense by Al-Hakam II, were burned publicly. However, with Al-Mansur's death in 1002, interest in philosophy revived. Numerous scholars emerged, including Abu Uthman ibn Fathan, whose masterwork was the philosophical treatise Tree of Wisdom. Maslama ibn Ahmad al-Mariti was an outstanding scholar in astronomy and astrology. he was an intrepid traveler who journeyed all over the Islamic world and beyond and kept in touch with the Brethren of Purity. Indeed, he is said to have brought the 51 epistles of the Brethren of Purity to Al-Andalus and added the compendium to this work, although it is quite possible that it was added later by another scholar with the name Al-Marati. Another book attributed to Al-Marati is the Yat al-Hakim, The Aim of the Sage, which explored a synthesis of Platonism with Hermetic philosophy. Its use of incantations led the book to be widely dismissed in later years, although the Sufi communities kept studies of it. A prominent follower of Al-Marati was the philosopher and geometer Abu al-Hakam al-Kirmani. A follower of his, in turn, was the great Abu Bakr ibn al-Sal, usually known in the Arab world as Ibn Bajjur, Avenpace. The Andalusian philosopher Averroes was the founder of the Averroism school of philosophy, and his works and commentaries had an impact on medieval thought in Western Europe. Another influential Andalusian philosopher was Ibn Tufayl. Jewish philosophy and culture. As Jewish thought in Babylonia declined, the tolerance of Al-Andalus made it the new center of Jewish intellectual endeavors. Poets and commentators like Judah Halevi and Danash ben Labrat contributed to the cultural life of Al-Andalus, but the area was even more important to the development of Jewish philosophy. A stream of Jewish philosophers, cross-fertilizing with Muslim philosophers, culminated with the widely celebrated Jewish thinker of the Middle Ages, Maimonides, though he did not actually do any of his work in Al-Andalus because his family fled persecution by the Almohads when he was 13. See also, Moorish Gibraltar, social and cultural exchange in Al-Andalus, timeline of the Muslim presence in the Iberian Peninsula, Muslim conquests, Al-Agharb al-Andalus, Almoravids, Almohad dynasty, La Convivencia, Islamic Golden Age, Islam in Spain, History of Islam, History of the Jews under Muslim rule, Islam and Antisemitism Iberian Peninsula, Arab diaspora, Spanish people, Latino Muslims, Morisco, Mozarab, Muladi, Kemal race, list of Moorish writers, footnotes. References, Farmer, Henry George, Historical Facts for the Arabian Musical Influence, Air Publishing, ISBN A978-0-405-08496-6. Saliba, George. Sazgin, F., Review, Geschichte des Arabischen Schriftraumes. Band 6, Astronomy bis circa 430 H. by F. Sazgin, Journal of the American Oriental Society 101, 219 A-221, doi, 10.2307/601763, JSTORA 601763 A. Glick, Thomas. Islamic and Christian Spain in the Early Middle Ages, Comparative Perspectives on Social and Cultural Formation. Retrieved October 23, 2011. A. Bibliography, Alfonso, Esperanza, 2007. Islamic Culture Through Jewish Eyes, Al-Andalus from the 10th to 12th Century. New York, New York, Routledge. ISBN 978-0-415-43732-5, Al-Jazari, S.E. 2005. The Hidden Debt to Islamic Civilization. Beit el-Hikmah Press. ISBN 0-9551156-1-2, Bossong, Georg. 2002. Der Name Al-Andalus, Näher Burgundien zu einem alten Problem. In David Russell and Dietmar Zaufera, eds., Sounds and Systems, Studies in Structure and Change. A Festschrift für Theo Vennemann. Berlin, Mouton de Goethe ppA 149 €164. Also available online, see external links below. Cohen, Mark 1995. Under Crescent and Cross, The Jews in the Middle Ages Princeton University Press. ISBN 0-691-01082-X, Collins, Roger. 1989. The Arab Conquest of Spain, 710 €797, Blackwell. ISBN 0-631-19405-3, Dodds, Geraldine D. Al-Andalus, The Art of Islamic Spain. New York, The Metropolitan Museum of Art. ISBN A9780870996368. Frank, Daniel H. and Lehman, Oliver. 2003. The Cambridge Companion to Medieval Jewish Philosophy. Cambridge University Press. ISBN 0-521-65574-9, Gurley, E. Michael, ed. 2003. Medieval Iberia, an Encyclopedia. New York. ISBN 0-415-93918-6, Harm, Heinz. 1989. Al-Andalus Ungothicus source. Der Islam 66 252 Euro 263. Hamilton, Michelle M., Sarah J. Portnoy, and David A. Wax, eds. 2004. Wine, Women, and Song, Hebrew and Arabic Literature in Medieval Iberia. Newark, Delaware. Juan de la Cuesta Hispanic Monographs. Harzig, Christiane, Herder, Dirk and Schubert, Adrian. 2003. The Historical Practice in Diversity. Burfan Books. ISBN 1-57181-377-2, Jayouzi, Salma Khadra, ed. 1994. The Legacy of Muslim Spain. 2 vol. Chief Consultant to the Editor, Manuel Amaro N. Leiden, Brill. Originally published 1992 in German. Kennedy, Hugh 1996. Muslim Spain and Portugal, A Political History of Al-Andalus, Longman. ISBN 0-582-49515-6, Kramer, Joel 1997. Comparing Crescent and Cross. The Journal of Religion, 1997 July, 77, 3, 449 Euro 454. Kramer, Joel 2005. Moses Maimonides, An Intellectual Portrait. In Kenneth Seeskin, ed., The Cambridge Companion to Maimonides. Cambridge University Press. ISBN 0-521-81974-1, Kramer, Joel 2008. Maimonides: The Life and World of One of Civilization's Greatest Minds. New York, Doubleday. ISBN 0-385-51199-X, Lafont y Alcantara, Emilio, translator. 1867. Orba Majmua, Kra Kubnika Anna Kubnima del Siglo 11/Dada a luz por primera vez, traducida y annotada por Emilio Lafont y Alcantara. Madrid, Real Academia de la Historia y Geografía. In Spanish and Arabic. Also available in the public domain online, see external links. Luscombe, David A. L., eds. 2004. The New Cambridge Medieval History, Volume 4, c. 1024 Euro c. 1198, Part 1. Cambridge University Press. ISBN 0-521-41411-3, Marcus, Ivan G., 1985. Beyond the Sephardic Mystique in Urim, Volume 1, 35-53. Marien, Manuela A. L., eds. 1998. The Formation of Al-Andalus, History and Society. Ashgate. ISBN 0-86078-708-7, Monocle, Maria Rosa 2002. Ornament of the World, How Muslims, Jews, and Christians Created a Culture of Tolerance in Medieval Spain. Black Bay Books. ISBN 0-316-16871-8, Monroe, James T. 1970. Islam and the Arabs in Spanish Scholarship. Leiden. Monroe, James T. 1974. Hispano-Arabic Poetry, a Student Anthology. Berkeley, University of California Press. Netanyahu, Benzion 1995. The Origins of the Inquisition in 15th Century Spain. Random House ISBN 0-679-41065-1, O'Callaghan, Joseph F. 1975. A History of Medieval Spain. Cornell University Press. ISBN 0-8014-9264-5, Omar, Raji. 2005. An Islamic History of Europe. Video documentary, BBC 4, August 2005. Riley, Bernard F. 1993. The Medieval Spains. Cambridge University Press. ISBN 0-521-39741-3, Raff, Norman. 1994. Jews, Visigoths and Muslims in Medieval Spain, Cooperation and Conflict. Leiden, Brill. ISBN 90-04-06131-2, Sanchez Albornoz, Claudio 1974. El Islam de Hispar plus or minus AYL Occident. Madrid, Espasa-Calp. College Circuit de Nostral. 1560. Originally published in 1965 in the Conference Proceedings, L'Occident y l'Islam nello Alto Medioevo, 2-8 April 1964, 2 vols. Spoleto, Centro Italiano di Studi sull'Alto Medioevo. Series, Settimane di Studio del Centro Italiano di Studi sull'Alto Medioevo. 12. Volume 1 149 Euro 308. Shish, Isma, 1989. The Myth of Sephardic Supremacy, in the Leo Baruch Institute Yearbook 34, 47-66, Stevans, Elan 2003. The Scroll and the Cross, 1000 Years of Jewish Hispanic Literature. London, Routledge. ISBN 0-415-92930-X, The Art of Medieval Spain, AD 500-1200. New York, The Metropolitan Museum of Art 1993. ISBN A0870996851-R, Wasserstein, David J. 1995. Jewish Copyright Rights in Al-Andalus. In Daniel Frank. The Jews of Medieval Islam, Community, Society and Identity. Brill. ISBN 90-04-10404-6, external links, paper by Georg Bossong evaluating proposals for the etymology of Al-Andalus. In German. Photocopy of the Obermatchm, translated by Lafwant 1867, The Roots of Al-Andalus, the Library of Iberian Resources Online, Al-Andalus Chronology and Photos, Christian Martyrs in Muslim Spain by Kenneth Baxter Wolfe, The Musical Legacy of Al-Andalus, Euro-historical maps, photos, and music showing the Great Mosque of Cordoba and related movements of people and culture over time, Patricia, Countess Jalico, 1992, The Art of Islamic Spain, Saudi Aramco World, Cities of Light, The Rise and Fall of Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, The Art of Islamic Spain, an exhibition catalogue. From the Metropolitan Museum of Art.